Effective immediately, the royal household will cease all engagement with Mrs. Meghan Markle in any form, capacity, or extension. Those 31 words, released at 6:40 a.m. from Prince William's Secure Communications office inside Kensington Palace, landed with the force of a constitutional earthquake. For the first time in modern memory, the future king publicly severed institutional ties with a family member who still held royal titles. And he did it in language so controlled, so frost-sharp, that even palace veterans struggled to recall anything comparable. This was not a leak, not a whisper from sources close to the family. This was William speaking directly, deliberately, and without an inch of diplomatic padding. And the timing was no coincidence. Insiders confirmed King Charles had quietly transferred full crisis narrative authority to William and Catherine just 48 hours earlier, in what senior courtiers are already calling the moment the monarchy crossed into a new era. With Charles fatigued by health pressures and the old Buckingham Palace messaging apparatus buckling under public distrust, the handover was not ceremonial. It was strategic survival. According to those briefed on the decision, the internal directive signed by Charles, informally known as the Autumn Mandate, placed Catherine as the architect of royal messaging and William as the executor, the single authoritative voice when the institution required clarity, decisiveness, and moral force. That force arrived on a cold October morning. Within minutes of the announcement, Meghan's California-based media network lit up with familiar claims: institutional hostility, unfair targeting, favoritism toward Catherine, and even emotional cruelty allegedly directed by King Charles. But this time, something unprecedented happened. William answered back. Publicly, formally, without hesitation. Facing a trimmed circle of correspondents inside the picture gallery, William delivered what one reporter later described as the most uncompromising royal statement since the Queen's 1997 address after Diana's death. His tone was calm, his posture fixed, his message brutal in its precision. No member of this family has bullied Mrs. Markle, he said. No one has been favored at her expense. What we are witnessing now is a direct result of her choices, her actions, and her repeated efforts to erode the integrity of this institution. Then he went further than any royal watcher imagined he ever would. We have evidence of coordinated media manipulation, he continued, including paid placements designed to damage my wife's reputation. These were not misunderstandings. They were intentional. It was an extraordinary allegation, delivered with the icy steadiness of a man who had been pushed far beyond patience. Sources close to palace operations confirmed William was referencing a cluster of 2024 PR campaigns in which Meghan reportedly commissioned articles implying Catherine's popularity was manufactured and that Charles felt overshadowed by Meghan's global appeal. Those articles have quietly disappeared from their host outlets in recent months. What stunned Britain even more was William's revelation that Meghan had sought emotional alliance with Sarah Ferguson. Fergie, long vulnerable to royal marginalization, had, according to William, been pulled into Meghan's network during Catherine's own recovery period in 2024. The collaboration, described by an insider as covert emotional triangulation, attempted to weaponize old wounds within the family. Creating internal factions is unacceptable, William said firmly. Exploiting vulnerable members of this family is intolerable. And then came the line that recalibrated the entire crisis. We applied standards of accountability to the Duke of York. The same standard applies to Mrs. Markle. The message could not have been clearer. No one, not Andrew, not Meghan, not any titled individual, will be shielded from consequence. But the moment that silenced the room was William's stance on Harry. I will not comment on the Duke of Sussex, he said, nor will I acknowledge or respond to entertainment-based commentary surrounding him. There will be no future engagement through public channels. Translation: William is done absorbing criticism. Done cleaning up after his brother's interviews and live streams. Done waiting for a reconciliation built on wishful thinking rather than reality. And then, unexpectedly, William spoke directly about Archie and Lilibet. They are innocent, he said. They deserve stability and dignity. If safeguarding them requires intervention, the institution will not hesitate. A palace aide stressed afterward that this was not a threat, rather a declaration of duty. But the subtext was unmistakable. The monarchy will not permit the children to become props in a perpetual media war. Inside the palace, the mood was not triumphant. It was focused, resolved. The first step in a long fight had been taken, and there would be no turning back. William is not threatening custody. He is signaling readiness to act. In private, Catherine echoed the sentiment to her staff. We won't let these children become stories for streaming platforms. They're not content. They're heirs. What emerged from the chaos wasn't rage. It was resolve. And it marked the beginning of the Crown's most assertive information strategy in over half a century. Just 72 hours after William's seismic announcement, the next wave didn't arrive from Windsor, nor from any British newsroom. It came from the polished hills of Montecito, where, at precisely 8:01 a.m. Pacific Time, a synchronized media blitz ignited across Los Angeles and New York. The headline echoed everywhere. Exclusive. Meghan breaks silence after palace fallout. Yet Meghan herself did not appear. Not in person. Not in video. Not even in audio. This was not a public statement. It was the opening salvo of a meticulously engineered PR counteroffensive. Insiders from 3 major agencies confirmed that Meghan's team had been preparing this rollout for weeks, anticipating that the palace, under William's title leadership, would one day strike back. The strategy deployed was a classic celebrity crisis model. Soften the target, reframe the narrative, and plant emotional triggers. Phase 1. The victim framed hand-selected friends and unnamed close sources distributed identical phrases to entertainment editors. Meghan felt unsafe and unsupported throughout her royal years. She was never granted emotional space to heal. Her mental health struggles were minimized by senior royals. These quotes circulated within minutes, each crafted to evoke sympathy while casting doubt on William's earlier claims of intentional manipulation. Phase 2. Reinvention as Rebirth the Second Wave was all about brand rebuilding. Meghan was reportedly exploring a docu-series about intergenerational healing, a new children's project framed around resilience, a lifestyle initiative promoting emotional detoxing. The subtext was unmistakable. She's rising above the feud. But palace staff saw something else, an attempt to repackage the same conflict in new, monetizable packaging. Phase 3. The children as shields, perhaps the most provocative detail. A quote provided variety by someone described as a longtime confidant. Meghan's only priority is keeping her children safe from the institution that rejected her. It was a pointed insinuation, intentionally designed to portray Archie and Lilibet not as royal children caught in a family dispute, but as innocents being rescued from a cold empire. Palace aides bristled. Kensington Palace responded with a statement sharper than their usual reserved language. We will not entertain narratives manufactured for commercial gain. Within the palace, this sentence was understood as Catherine's influence. Precise, controlled, devastating. But William went further. He authorized preliminary steps toward what insiders had long whispered about but never expected to see in motion, the full stripping of the Sussex titles. According to documents seen by senior advisors, an internal royal order, coded W17, was quietly sent to the Privy Council. It outlined 3 recommendations: full removal of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex titles, a formal advisory to global embassies not to recognize either individual as acting royals, an immediate freeze on any royal property or ceremonial privileges attached to the Sussex name. This was no disciplinary measure. This was constitutional severance. Meanwhile, Hollywood's reaction was not uniformly supportive of Meghan. A senior executive at a major streaming platform privately remarked, "There's royal intrigue, and then there's fatigue, and I think the tide is turning." Another industry figure, known for negotiating celebrity book deals, was blunter. William has the monarchy. Meghan has her clout. But only one of those is a 1,000-year institution. Yet Meghan's allies did not retreat. A major publisher rushed to accelerate her next memoir project. A podcast studio revived discussions about a limited series exploring royal secrets from the mother's perspective. In the middle of the storm, the palace remained silent. Not passive, strategic. King Charles released no comment. Not because he was indifferent, but because the public had already sensed that power had shifted. The new axis of influence was unmistakable. William and Catherine. Catherine's next move was quiet, but symbolically lethal. 3 days after the Hollywood leaks, she attended a pediatric oncology center in Oxford. No tiara, no photographer summoned, no carefully choreographed press moment. She wore a muted blue coat, carried a small notebook, and spent nearly an hour with families navigating their own storms. One child asked if she was feeling better, a reference to tabloid speculation about her health. Catherine smiled gently and replied, "I'm very well. We all learn to be strong in our own way." 7 words. And yet that moment traveled faster and wider than Meghan's entire PR rollout. It wasn't a speech. It wasn't a counterattack. It was authenticity, and the public felt it. By nightfall, the hashtag Catherine the Steady trended across the UK and Canada. In contrast, U.S. late-night hosts openly questioned whether Meghan's narrative now felt too rehearsed, too defensive, or simply unconvincing. Inside Buckingham Palace, the shift was palpable. This was no longer a feud. This was an ideological battle between two worlds. Royal duty versus celebrity strategy. Service versus spectacle. Substance versus performance. And William, fortified by Catherine's quiet strength, was no longer willing to blur the lines. A confidential briefing leaked to the Times summarized William's private stance. Forgiveness is possible, but enabling harm is not. For the first time since the Sussex split began, the monarchy wasn't reacting. It was leading. And Meghan, used to defining the narrative, suddenly found herself fighting for ownership of a story that no longer moved in her direction. What came next would test every relationship, every alliance, and every remaining bridge between two brothers once bound by grief and now divided by conviction. As pressure built on both sides of the Atlantic and public opinion split between sympathy and skepticism, Buckingham Palace's strategy moved from defensive silence to a full recalibration of protocol. The Crown wasn't just managing headlines. It was restoring a hierarchy. William's internal message to staff was clear. Emotional damage cannot be an excuse to weaponize heritage. And for the first time in a generation, the monarchy issued a directive not against public opinion, but against private manipulation. By late October, all palace departments had received new engagement rules. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex were to be removed from all internal distribution lists. Their names struck from ceremonial programs, national event planning, and diplomatic correspondence. Staff were instructed to treat all future requests referencing them as non-royal external affairs. The language used internally was stark. Zero access status. Indefinite. Non-negotiable. This marked the most decisive break in institutional memory. A clean separation not only of roles, but of recognition. But behind the administrative firewall, deeper tensions remained. One involved Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, once sidelined, now suddenly re-emerging as a shadow player in Meghan's growing media circle. William, through private security intelligence, had obtained transcripts and metadata of encrypted communications between Meghan and Ferguson, indicating an act of collaboration to erode Catherine's public credibility during her recovery from illness. The campaign reportedly included strategic leaks to royal commentators about Catherine's fragility, coordinated pitch decks to streaming executives positioning Meghan as the strong maternal contrast, and subtle nods in interviews designed to stir public empathy at Catherine's expense. To William, this was no longer palace intrigue. It was media warfare disguised as personal healing. Ferguson was immediately removed from all upcoming royal engagements. Invitations were withdrawn. Security access was rescinded. And for extended royal family members watching silently from the sidelines, the message was unmistakable. There is no sanctuary for sabotage. It was Catherine's quiet response that resonated most. Just days after the Ferguson revelation, she appeared, unexpectedly, at a literacy event in East London. There were no cameras waiting. The visit wasn't listed on the public schedule. And yet, the moment a photo emerged online, Catherine, kneeling beside a 6-year-old girl reading aloud from a children's book, the image swept across global feeds within hours. She wore no jewelry, no bright colors, just a soft cream coat and a brooch shaped like an anchor. It was her only signal to the world. We are grounded. The contrast was devastating. While Meghan's team worked to push emotional damage into monetized redemption arcs, Catherine stepped into rooms that didn't need narrative, only presence. A nurse at the event later told reporters, "She didn't ask us what should be said. She asked what needed to be heard." And that, perhaps, is the most defining difference between the two royal women now shaping the modern era. One speaks to reframe. The other shows up to restore. Inside the palace, conversations shifted. This wasn't just about optics. It wasn't about who won the public's affection. It was about long-term stewardship. And William, facing unprecedented tension between fraternal loyalty and constitutional duty, made his position painfully clear. I am not defending the crown for my brother. I am defending it from what is allowed to happen. That distinction, subtle yet explosive, would be the line separating disappointment from disassociation. As reports swirled about Meghan's upcoming memoir and Harry's potential appearance at a Hollywood truth-telling panel, the Crown's next step was both expected and chilling in finality. A formal review of Harry's remaining honorary military affiliations, including those held in name only, was quietly initiated. If completed, it would mean the last ceremonial links to his royal life would be formally dissolved. But it was William's private note, distributed only to 10 of his closest advisors, that carried the true emotional weight. We must protect what is sacred, not sentimental. While the headlines focused on declarations and denouncements, something more enduring was unfolding within the royal apparatus, a quiet recalibration of power. The formal title reviews, strict security designations, and diplomatic distancing were not reactive punishments. They were foundational restructures. The Crown, long criticized for walking in circles around controversy, had begun moving in straight lines, and that direction was set by William and Catherine. At 9 a.m. on November 3rd, a classified document bearing the seal of Kensington Palace was hand-delivered to the Privy Council, known internally as Directive W17 Final. It outlined the monarchy's next irreversible steps. The Sussex titles, held since 2018, were to be officially suspended indefinitely, with no automatic pathway to reinstatement. All foreign embassies were to be instructed not to refer to the Sussexes as active members of the royal family. Meghan's remaining honorary patronages, including symbolic ties to royal-sponsored initiatives, were to be dissolved. A joint advisory was prepared for UK broadcasters, stating that use of the term royal in promotional materials related to the Sussexes would require express permission. The tone of the directive was clinical, detached. As one palace advisor put it, it read more like a corporate separation agreement than a royal memo. But behind that detached language was a deeply human decision. The monarchy had chosen to protect its long-term legacy, even if it meant losing one of its own. And King Charles? He said nothing publicly, but privately, according to a source close to his personal aide at Birkhall, he was tired of emotional leverage being used as a threat. The monarch's health had been a persistent undercurrent throughout the autumn, but now it became the quiet justification for action. If Charles's window of leadership was narrowing, he would ensure the architecture of the crown was future-proofed, stripped of internal confusion, safeguarded by clarity. That meant Catherine. Though she made no speeches, no rebuttals, and gave no interviews, Catherine's presence had become the monarchy's new stabilizer. Her reappearance at a Commonwealth Women's Forum in Cardiff, just days after the Sussex title suspension, drew subtle headlines. But one image from the event, Catherine seated in a circle of young leaders, no press team visible, holding a handwritten notepad, went viral for all the right reasons. She's not performing royalty, one attendee said. She's carrying it. It was no accident that Catherine had recently been asked to draft the opening remarks for the upcoming UN Women's Assembly, where she would represent the UK in place of the King. Nor was it coincidental that she had assumed 3 of Queen Elizabeth's former patronages in the space of 2 months. Inside the palace, a nickname began to circulate, first in whispers, then in official briefings. The Crown's Compass. It wasn't flattery. It was acknowledgement. Meanwhile, Meghan's team continued its counter-strategy. A production memo leaked to entertainment insiders revealed her next move, a short-form documentary titled Motherhood, A New Monarchy, pitched as a personal exploration of raising royal children outside royal boundaries. The project, while still in negotiation, had already drawn concern from royal legal advisors. The reason? Documents suggested that Archie and Lilibet's names and early childhood moments would be dramatized as part of a semi-scripted narrative. That was the final line. William's response came not through press, but through legal precision. He instructed the palace's Media Litigation Council to review all registered uses of the Sussex children's names in branded commercial properties, from merchandise to podcast titles. Any breach, one aide confirmed, would trigger formal cease and desist action. And then, quietly, William issued the instruction no one expected. Prepare a separate guardianship clause, not for custody, but for historical protection. The clause, drafted in consultation with royal legal historians and clergy representatives, ensured that Archie and Lilibet's names, titles, and lineage would be preserved in the royal archives, even if they were never returned to public royal life. It was not an erasure. It was a safeguard, a bridge back, should the future ever call them home. On the evening of November 14th, 2025, 5 senior members of the royal household gathered behind closed doors at Clarence House. No photographers, no press leaks, no ceremonial gestures, just silence, protocol, and the slow ticking of a grandfather clock that had belonged to Queen Elizabeth II. Present in the room, King Charles III, Prince William, Princess Catherine, Princess and Lady Louise Windsor. Also in attendance was the King's constitutional advisor, delivering a final review of Order W17 final implementation, the irreversible dissolution of all institutional ties to Harry and Meghan. Charles, weary but alert, listened as each item was read aloud. And when asked if he wished to append any personal clause to the formal record, he declined. Instead, he looked at Catherine and said, "You've done what I could not. You've held the line." Catherine's reply was barely audible, but those closest heard it clearly. For the crown, not for comfort. It was not a triumph. It was duty. And in that moment, the emotional heart of the monarchy quietly shifted. As the final decree was entered into record, 3 official steps were confirmed. All ceremonial privileges and public recognition of the Sussexes were now frozen indefinitely. A one-time symbolic allowance was extended for the well-being of Archie and Lilibet, subject to annual review. No further correspondence from the Sussex household would be acknowledged by any department under the Crown's jurisdiction. The chapter had closed, not with scandal, but with structure. But beyond the legalities, what truly marked the end of the Sussex saga was William's final internal communique to royal staff, sent under the subject line, "Doctrine of the Next Reign." It read, in part, "The monarchy is not a stage, nor a shield. It is a covenant, earned by conduct, not claimed by inheritance. We will protect what is entrusted to us, and we will not engage with narratives that ask us to apologize for enduring." The shift was more than generational. It was ideological. The Crown would no longer entertain emotional disruption as institutional discourse. The days of indulgence were over. Meanwhile, in Montecito, Meghan's silence resumed. The anticipated documentary was quietly pulled from internal calendars at 2 production houses. Her representatives declined to comment, and Harry, for his part, remained unseen. No statement, no counterstrike, no path back. But perhaps the final word came not from William or Charles, but from Catherine. On November 20th, the anniversary of the 1992 Windsor Castle fire, she made a previously unannounced visit to St. George's Chapel. There were no crowds, no royal press pool, only a single photographer stationed at a respectful distance. She wore navy, a modest brooch, and in her hands, she carried a small white bundle, a child's storybook. Sources close to her team later confirmed to have belonged to Princess Diana, one of the few remaining heirlooms untouched by scandal, untouched by narrative. A quiet reminder of love passed down, not performance passed off. She placed the book at the foot of a memorial candle and stood silently for a moment. Then she turned, smiled gently at the photographer, and exited through the chapel's north gate, alone. The image graced every front page the next morning. Where noise faded, she stood. The Telegraph. Not the air. The anchor. The Times. The era of emotional blackmail ends here. The Guardian. In the days that followed, a quiet reform was enacted within the palace. All future royal engagements would now include a legacy dignity review, a new protocol ensuring no event, patronage, or relationship will be tied to individuals leveraging royalty for personal brand warfare. The Queen Mother's old phrase returned among staff. When duty is heavy, silence becomes light. And Catherine, no longer simply the Princess of Wales, but the moral center of the institution, embodied that silence with grace. She did not win a war. She restored the peace. And as the royal standard flew steady above Windsor Castle once more, the world understood what had truly been decided. Not just titles or access, but what kind of monarchy the next reign would be built upon.